Greetings, SOSW viewers, it is your Jedi Knight Luke here with
the always dependable Captain Henson.
And we are getting on to Bad Batch Season 3. We've got 3 episodes to discuss here as they were all released back to back, starting with Episode 1, Confined. The episode begins with Imperials being struck down in a thunderstorm as they try to land on Tantis. The next morning, Omega is taken by Emery Carr, and she briefly crosses paths with Crosshair as part of her routine. Carr extracts a blood sample from Omega, and Nala Se discards it to keep her safe. Nala Se is taken away, and Omega finds Crosshair. While he's no longer a devout Empire loyalist, he doesn't particularly care about Omega at the moment. Either way, Omega promises to find a weakness so they can escape. The routine repeats until she sees one of the patrol hounds, Batcher, is wounded. She heals her and tells Crosshair she won't give up on him. On day 3 of this routine, an inspection happens in Omega's cell, and Hemlock reinforces the threat on Omega's life. In the Hound stables, Omega sets Batcher free, and Hemlock imposes restrictions on Omega's access to the facility. That night, Omega gets her toy back, which was taken from her the night before, and Batcher, the Hound she freed, calls out into the night and runs away, bringing the episode to an end.
So the episode did a good job at establishing what's been happening, and as one can imagine, Omega hasn't completely acclimated to this whole environment. I find her relationship with Crosshair interesting in that it seems like she cares about him to the extent of he was part of the Bad Batch, because as we've well established at this point, he does not care about her, or at least gives off that impression. Now, going into this season, we already knew that the reason they wanted Omega was to get Nala Se to do what they wanted, and we're starting to get more hints that there is, in fact, more to Omega than meets the eye. We still have no idea what the hell that is yet, but hopefully we'll get that relatively soon. Yeah, not much to really say on this episode. I thought her relationship with Batcher was interesting. Remind me, did the episode go into detail about what the purpose of these animals were to the facility?
I'm not sure if it's in this episode or one of the 2 that follows, but they are patrol/hunting hounds, basically.
Okay, so yeah, it makes sense for the domestication of one of them to be bad, although as we find out later, it didn't exactly destroy Batcher's hunting abilities. I do think this episode also did a good job at showcasing just how devoid of empathy the Empire is.
This was a really good start for this season, in my opinion. I thought it was interesting seeing the repetition in the routine, seeing Nala Se try to protect Omega with destroying the blood samples. Exactly what the blood samples will be used for, we still don't quite know that yet, do we?
No.
Why they're extracting blood samples and why they feel the need to do it on a literal daily basis.
Well, we get more information in episode 3.
Batcher was cute. And also, you know what you were saying about the whole devoid of empathy thing? It couldn't be shown much better with how distant Emery is to Omega, even though they are siblings.
I've said it in the last podcast, I'm really curious to know what her deal is. Again, we still have no idea why Omega was created. Like, we know why Boba Fett was created. That was strictly for selfish reasons on Jango's part, but why is Omega a thing? I mean, I would assume Nala Se had something to do with it since she cares so much for her, but then where the hell does this older-looking Omega fall into it? There's a lot of unanswered questions that I really hope the show doesn't take too long to answer. I mean, we're already in the last season. Let's not wait until, the last minute.
Crosshair still being really dismissive of Omega. Well, I mean, granted, that's soon to change, but here, yeah, he's just being stuck in his ways, even when he's not in the Empire's good graces.
Yeah, it does make sense for him to be completely hopeless in this situation.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to episode 2, Paths Unknown. The episode begins, funnily enough, with the Durand family, which is now just Roland and his mother, disposing of a traitor. Then Hunter and Wrecker arrive to deliver the very Pike who severed Roland's horn back in Season 1 to them. In return, Roland's mother gives the Bad Batch the data they supposedly need to find the Empire's supposed stronghold on Wayland. Hunter and Wrecker land on Wayland only to see that Hemlock's base, which we didn't know anything about until now, is completely destroyed. They're stopped by 2 younger clones, and they guide Hunter and Wrecker to a small gathering location with a couple of other guys, and along the way they fight off slither vines. Then, around a campfire, the other younger clones explain that there is a control panel which is still intact. However, slither vines, which we saw earlier on in the episode, are guarding it. They fight off the vines while the other pair of younger clones plan to steal the Marauder, but they have a change of heart with a call for help, and they rescue the heroes who are dealing with a Sarlacc, which they kill, basically, by just having it down a bunch of explosives. On the Marauder, Hunter realizes that the stronghold is now elsewhere, and he says to the younger clones that they will be safe on Pavu. And he also tells them that their mission isn't quite over yet, thus bringing the episode to an end.
Although this may seem like more of a side tangent, we do see that Hunter and Wrecker are actively trying to find Omega. And although we do take a bit of a detour to follow these young clones and see what they're up to, I do think it's not, wasted time. It is good to see what younger clones are up to, especially after what's happened in the previous seasons. Not to mention, it was nice to hear Daniel Logan voicing one of these younger clones. He didn't voice all 3, just the leader, which makes sense. Still, though, we do get more world building, find out more of Hemlock's history, even if we don't go into too much detail on it. This was the facility used before our current one, and seeing some of the experiments being done. Not to mention, I think it was good to see Hunter and Wrecker working only as a duo, because as we've well established in both TCW and this series, the Bad Batch were made to work as a unit, each one having skills that would lead the team to victory. And at this point, they don't have Tech, and they don't have Crosshair. So now they're just down to the leader who's good at tracking and the muscle. And we clearly see this unit is no longer working as well as it once did. So in that sense, I do think this episode was necessary for that.
You know what? I'll give this episode credit where it's due. Literally within the very opening scene, a little bit of behind the scenes for you, I messaged Henson and was like, why did they bring Roland back? And I was really worried that this episode was going to turn into one of those standalone weird adventures. And I say this as someone who has liked pretty much every Bad Batch episode, even the standalone ones, which, to be brutally honest with you, make up a ton of Bad Batch's storylines. Here I am and I'm thinking, okay, finally we should be at the point now where every episode serves the important narrative rather than going off on these adventures. But thankfully, this episode actually does keep on track in that sense. And the younger clones, I wasn't sure what to make of them at first, but they're okay. I actually didn't realise it was Daniel Logan voicing one of them, so good on you for picking that up, Henson.
It also said it in the credits. He
So that's
voiced the leader, Mox, I think.
And the Slithervines. Initially, I thought those would just be a random creation, but no, it is actually explained that they were the byproduct of a failed experiment.
As I alluded to, this episode does, I'd say, important world building.
The reveal of a Sarlacc I thought was quite cool, actually, and the fact that they killed it by just chugging explosives down its gullet. That was pretty satisfying in a way to see it blow up. And you said this in the last Bad Batch Season 2 recording, Henson, but we get more of it here. The whole exploration of clones and people in general can live a life without war, and Hunter explains in the final sequence to the younger clones that, when we take you to Pabu, you can carve your own path. Which is nice to see. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the third and final episode of this trio, Shadows of Tantis. This episode begins with Omega's Imperial routine repeating itself, though following the blood extraction this time around, Nala Se tells Omega to escape. Omega makes it to the lab which Emery is instructed to oversee in this case, and steals a datapad, which grants her access throughout the facility. Then, Emperor Palpatine arrives and asks Hemlock to grant him access to Project Necromancer. Omega wakes up Crosshair, and he distracts the guards. The Emperor gets a glimpse of Project Necromancer, while Omega and Crosshair escape via the Hound stables. Emery finds them, though she is stunned soon after. The Emperor departs Tantis, and Omega and Crosshair race to a crashed shuttle, which isn't working. Nala Se is incarcerated, and the search team and Hounds are sent out for the escapees. Batcher saves Crosshair and Omega from the search party. They're spotted by a tiger, who is distracted by the Hounds, and Omega and Crosshair enact Plan 72. Batcher saves Crosshair and Omega from the search party, and the heroes hijack a shuttle and escape. However, back on the base, Omega's blood sample wasn't destroyed and tested positive. No caveats at all. Hemlock calls off the pursuit and says that he will find her, bringing the episode to an end.
So, I'm of two minds about the setup here. So, on the one hand, I get it. With the sequel trilogy, in this case, particularly Rise of Skywalker, being the way it is, it's up to other material to, make sense of it. And in the case of this, it's firmly establishing the cloning bullshit we get in Episode 9. But on the other hand, because I know that's the reason it's here, it does partially annoy me. Now, I can live with it, but the fact that it's here due to needing to explain the bullshit from another entry, it does take the wind out of my sail just a little bit. At the very least, I can say it does make sense for Sidious to want to, clone himself successfully. Because him wanting to cheat death is just a natural part of his character. And, hell, that's what we got in the expanded universe, so it makes sense for him to be invested in the idea here, too. Now, we don't get a lot of information on the specifics of Project Necromancer, but again, hopefully we do get it down the road. Now, as for Omega and Crosshair's escape, I thought it was actually really well done. I thought they explained everything in a way that made sense. I totally bought that they were able to make this escape. And Hemlock letting them get away also makes sense. Again, we have no idea why Omega's blood is exactly what they need, but still, we have our setup for future episodes there. And I'll always say it, it's always great to hear Ian McDermott play Sidious. I'm always glad that he's just down to do Star Wars whenever the fuck they need him to. Especially since they don't have any kind of replacement or stand in. Especially since the TCW actor died years ago.
As far as this episode goes, probably my favourite out of the three, to be honest. I think it's great to see more of Alice's concern for Omega. I think it's great that finally we see a little bit of compassion from Crosshair for Omega, and seeing them work together and genuinely having each other's back. Big thumbs up from me. As for the whole thing with Project Necromancer, yeah, it's tough when supplemental media is trying to give some sort of justification for poor writing, in this case from one of the core entries. This is a job that supplemental material should never ever have to do. I mean, I think you said it yourself, what was it, 2 years ago? Was it the new canon as a whole, or the sequel era in particular, where you said patchwork is the only way to sort it out?
I believe it was the new canon as a whole. Because at this point, it's still a mess. And we can do all the patchwork we want. Let's face it, when I say patchwork, I really just mean with the shows and movies. Lucasfilm, Disney still doesn't give a shit about the books, comics. I'd say they care about the games, just a bit lower than the movies and shows. And, really what this will lead to is the only way to not only fully understand the sequel trilogy, but get any sort of appreciation out of it, is to have these other entries, in this case Disney Plus shows, go out of their way to not only explain elements of the sequel trilogy that just weren't explained, in this case Palpatine, but also trying to say that no, actually all this does make sense. Here's us setting it up. Setting it up in hindsight, but still.
The supplemental material, as I say, especially when it comes to the sequel era, does have a degree of sympathy from me, because as I previously said, this is a job that it shouldn't have to do. Some of the supplemental material gets more of my sympathy than others, partly because some of the supplemental material on its own merits is crap. This, however, is one of the good cases as far as supplemental material goes, so I feel bad that this show has to try and justify that.
It's one of those things where you're dealing with an expanded universe, so to speak. So when you have the opportunity like that, you take advantage of it. This isn't like a more standalone story that's not connected to anything, where if that story has things that don't make sense, there's nothing you can really do about it. But with something like Star Wars, if something doesn't make sense or isn't explained well, you can create just an entire story to explain it. I mean, just look at something like Sifo Dyas in Attack of the Clones. We get his name dropped there, but get, nothing about him or why he commissioned this clone army, but then, here comes the EU to explain it. Now, of course, the Sifo Dyas thing was just a little nugget. Not exactly that important to understanding the plot of that film, while in the case of Palpatine somehow returning, not understanding what the fuck is going on is a major problem. It's unfortunate, but at the very least, it does make sense here. Like I said, it does make sense for Sidious to care or to invest time and resources into cloning.
Yeah, just repeating what you said about Ian McDiarmid. Great that he's back again.
He's still nailing it.
Oh yeah. These Bad Batch appearances are probably the most menacing that he has been in a long time, just in terms of his presence.
Though his season 2 appearance was one of my favorite Palpatine appearances ever.
And to see the Royal Guards again, to see that transition is also really cool. And who knows what will befall Omega and Crosshair in the episodes to come.
Yes, I am very much interested in seeing where this story goes. And hopefully the secrets are revealed. And they don't take forever to do so. We are in the last season. We know this is the last season. So hopefully everything ends satisfactory.
So, shall we wrap this up?
Yes. So, overall, a really solid start to the season. Really getting the ball rolling, not really wasting time on any meandering bullshit. And hopefully the upcoming episodes are able to just keep up that momentum.
Great start to this season. The stakes are the highest that they have ever been, and to set it up as such right from the off is fantastic, and hopefully now we're going to stick to the core narrative now. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Jedi Knight Luke of SOSW with
The one and only Captain Henson.
and we will see you guys next time. So until then, goodbye, and may the Force be with you.
So long.